Thanksgiving was always a mess in our family. Not in the fun, chaotic, too many kids running around way. No, ours was more like walking into a courtroom where everyone already knew the verdict, and I was the defendant every year. Still, I came. I told myself it was for my mom, that if I skipped it, she'd call crying. But if I'm being honest, a part of me still wanted to believe I belonged. That maybe this year would be different. It wasn't. Dinner started like usual. My brother, Ryan, playing the charming golden boy. His fiancée, Lauren, sitting beside him like she already owned the house. Dad carving the turkey while ignoring everything that wasn't on his plate. And my mom, trying too hard to smile. There was a toast. Ryan stood up, champagne in hand, tapping the glass with his ring finger. Before we dig in, he said, I want to thank everyone for being here. Family means everything to us. And with the wedding coming up, Lauren and I just want to say how grateful we are for the love and support. Polite clapping. Smiles. I even raised my glass. Then he turned to me. And actually, he said, we've made a difficult decision. One that wasn't easy, but one we all agreed on. We've decided you won't be invited to the wedding. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. But no one else was laughing. My mom looked down. My dad kept chewing. Lauren grinned into her wine glass. And the rest of the table, cousins, aunts, people I grew up with, started nodding. Some even clapped. I'm sorry, Ryan said, clearly not sorry. But you've made it really hard to include you in our future. You've been distant, negative, critical, and honestly, toxic. He actually said that. Toxic. Something inside me cracked. But not the way he wanted. Not the way they expected. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just reached into my bag and pulled out a plain manila folder. No label. Just thick enough to feel heavy. I slid it across the table toward him. The room went quiet. Forks paused midair. Even the kids in the other room seemed to stop shouting. Ryan raised an eyebrow. What's this? I smiled. A small one. Then I said slowly, you won't need this. He opened it. At first, his face was smug. Then confused. Then panic. He looked up at me like he'd seen a ghost. No, he whispered. You wouldn't. He stood so fast his chair fell over. Everyone was frozen. What the hell is this? He shouted, voice cracking. Where did you get this? Still, I said nothing. Lauren leaned over to look. Her hand flew to her mouth. And just like that, the entire table, the whole family, went silent. They looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Or maybe like they finally saw him for who he really was. To understand why I brought that folder, you'd have to understand what it's like to be slowly erased, not all at once, but piece by piece, over years. Like erosion. A drip here, a cut there, until you're just the shadow of the person they let into the room. It didn't start with hatred. It started with Ryan being the favorite. He was charming, athletic, always knew how to spin a story to get out of trouble. When we were kids, he'd break something and point to me. I'd cry and say it wasn't me, and Mom would say, just admit it, honey. We know you're sensitive. That word haunted me growing up. Sensitive. It was their polite way of calling me a liar. By high school, Ryan was the star. Varsity everything. College scholarships. Girlfriends. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the bookworm. When I got into a great college, they barely reacted. When I mentioned student loans, my dad said, that's how you build character. Ryan, of course, got his tuition covered. And when he dropped out 2 years in, nobody talked about it. After college, I came back for holidays and birthdays. I kept trying, bringing thoughtful gifts, asking about everyone's lives. But Ryan always found a way to needle me. Still working that boring desk job? Still single? You always look tired. Are you okay? It was always wrapped in a joke. And everyone laughed, including me, because what else could I do? Then came the bigger betrayals. When our grandmother passed, she left behind a small inheritance, nothing huge, but enough to matter. She told me once that she wanted to help me get on my feet. I found out at the reading that her will had been amended 3 months before she died. Everything went to Ryan. I asked questions. Got blank stares. My mom said, don't make this about money. My dad said, let it go. Ryan just smiled. But the one that really broke me happened 2 years ago. I had a health scare. Ended up in the hospital with complications from an infection. I was in for 6 days. Not one person from my family came to visit. Not one call. Not even a text. When I finally came home, still pale and weak, I posted a photo, something simple, just saying I was grateful to be alive. Ryan commented, yikes. Bit dramatic, don't you think? 2 people liked the comment. One of them was our mother. That's when I stopped pretending they loved me the same. I started pulling back, skipping more events, keeping my answers short. That's when they started calling me distant, cold, toxic. It's funny how people will hurt you for years and then act betrayed when you finally stop bleeding for them. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because I knew something Ryan didn't. When people like him think they're invincible, they get sloppy. They leave things behind. Messages. Paper trails. And over the years, I had quietly, carefully, saved them. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was truth. And that folder? It was just the beginning. The moment everything shifted for me came on a random Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic. No big blowout or screaming match. Just a quiet realization that I was done begging to be loved by people who saw me as disposable. I was cleaning out a drawer in my apartment when I found an old email from my mom. I hadn't read it in years. It was from the week after our grandmother died, when I had asked her, gently, if she knew anything about the will being changed. Her response was 4 lines long. Don't start this again. Ryan was the one who helped Grandma toward the end. You need to stop obsessing. It's not healthy. What struck me wasn't just the dismissal, it was the tone. Like I was being ridiculous for even asking. Like Ryan walking away with everything was normal. Expected. That's when I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed 2 words at the top. They think I won't fight. From that day forward, I started paying attention. I scrolled through years of family group chats. Most messages skipped me entirely, except for the occasional "Can you bring plates to Easter?" or "Ryan's birthday is Sunday. Don't forget a card." I dug through emails, found bank statements from my dad's old business where Ryan had somehow been added as a consultant years after college, collecting checks while supposedly unemployed. There was a pattern, a quiet siphoning, not just of affection, but of power. Ryan had slowly positioned himself as the responsible one, the favorite, the voice of reason, and they'd let him. But the breaking point? That came when I found the revised will. I didn't know my parents had updated their estate plan. I wasn't even supposed to see it. But a cousin, bless her heart, sent me a photo of a letter she found in a shared Google Drive that Ryan forgot to lock down. It was a draft of my parents' will. Ryan was listed as the sole executor and beneficiary. I was mentioned once, in the event that my name has shown material improvement in their relationship with the family, they may be eligible for reconsideration. Reconsideration. Like I was a job applicant. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. They never saw me as equal. They saw me as defective, as a burden, a threat to Ryan's curated image. That's when I started building the folder. Piece by piece, I added screenshots of Ryan mocking me in group chats he thought I wasn't in. Venmo transactions showing him reimbursing Dad for estate advice in suspiciously large sums. An audio recording crackly, but clear, of Ryan bragging at a party that he had talked the old man into locking things down before I got any ideas. And finally, the will itself. The version that named me as an equal beneficiary before it mysteriously changed. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet. I just knew it needed to exist. Because truth has a weight to it. And for once, I wanted them to feel it. Then came the wedding invitation. Or rather, the lack of one. Lauren texted me a photo of the save the date card and said, "Just so you don't hear it from someone else, we're keeping things intimate." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because by then, Thanksgiving was already on the calendar. And I had everything I needed. People think revenge is about rage. But when you've spent years being erased, revenge becomes quiet, methodical. A project you chip away at in the early mornings before work, or late at night when sleep won't come. I started assembling the folder in earnest the week after that save the date text. My hands shook a little, not from anger, just from the weight of it all. I was building an archive, a case, a last word. First, I sorted through digital scraps, screenshots, old emails, voice memos from family events where I'd record myself in the car afterward, talking through what had just happened so I wouldn't forget how it felt. It was embarrassing at first, hearing my own voice, the tremor in it. But it was also evidence. I was not crazy, not overreacting. It was all there. I dug deeper. Old tax documents from my dad's business. Ryan had convinced my parents to hire him for consulting, siphoning off thousands over the years, money I was told didn't exist. There were checks written in my father's neat script, marked for advice, planning, or sometimes just R. There was the email chain from when Grandma died, where Ryan argued for efficiency and family unity, subtly pushing my mother to change the will. In one message, he wrote, "It's what Grandma would have wanted. We don't need outsiders making this messy." Outsiders. That's what I was to him. I found proof that my dad had left me off the life insurance policy, a change made 2 months after a fight we'd had about Ryan, naturally. I still remember how stunned I was that day. Now, seeing the document, I realized it was never a mistake. It was a plan. Then there was the audio file I'd almost deleted, Ryan's drunken voice at a bachelor party, boasting to a cousin, "The only thing standing between me and the house is my name. But don't worry, I'll take care of it." I transcribed everything, labeled each piece, built a timeline of every slight, every exclusion, every dirty trick. But there was one thing missing: proof that the will had been changed under pressure, not just as a result of family drift. That's when I started looking for witnesses. I called Grandma's old lawyer, pretending I needed advice on estate planning. After some coaxing, he admitted he'd been surprised by the last-minute change. He remembered Ryan coming by alone, without my parents, carrying a folder of his own. That was all I needed. I sent myself an encrypted email with everything, just in case. The folder grew heavier, the air in my apartment thicker. Sometimes I worried I'd become obsessed, that maybe I was making a mountain out of a lifetime of disappointments. But every time I doubted, I found another receipt, another message, another reason. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted the truth out, to force them to look at the story they'd written, whether they liked it or not. So I waited. Ate frozen dinners, watched mindless TV, counted down to Thanksgiving. The invitation sat unopened on my fridge. And on the morning of the big day, I packed the folder into my bag, zipped it up, and promised myself I wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. Not again. As I walked up the driveway, I knew I wasn't the same person they'd pushed aside. I was the one with the truth. Thanksgiving arrived colder than usual that year. There was frost on the grass, and every breath felt sharp and metallic. I parked down the street, sat for a minute with my hands on the steering wheel, the folder pressed flat under my coat. My chest hurt, not from fear, but from the odd calm that comes just before you finally let go. Inside, the house was buzzing. People I hadn't seen in months drifted in and out of the kitchen, balancing drinks and swapping family gossip. There was laughter, loud, forced. I caught my reflection in the foyer mirror and barely recognized myself. Steady eyes, lips set. I had rehearsed what I would say, but in the end, I didn't need words. I only needed the folder. Ryan was everywhere. At the stove, telling Dad how to carve the turkey. Whispering in Lauren's ear as she arranged the table. He was so at ease, so secure. Everyone deferred to him, even my mother, who fluttered nervously as she polished the wine glasses. I was invisible. They let me be invisible. Until dinner. We all gathered around the table, the same seats as always. Ryan stood, glass in hand, and launched into a speech about family unity and moving forward. His voice was warm, humble, confident. I watched him, thinking, "You're good at this. You always were." Then came the moment. He cleared his throat, glanced at Lauren, and made his announcement, calm, rehearsed, final. I would not be invited to the wedding. The room tensed, waiting for my reaction. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Only a strange sense of relief. I let the silence stretch before I reached into my bag, took out the manila folder, and placed it in front of Ryan. "Then I guess you won't need this," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I watched him open it. His face changed as he skimmed the contents. At first, his grin stayed fixed, frozen in place by habit. But then his eyes darted over the pages, copies of the old will, the revised version, the emails, the bank transfers, the lawyer's phone transcript. His mouth parted. I saw his hand shake. Lauren leaned over, read the first page, and recoiled as if burned. "What is this?" she whispered. Ryan looked up at me, all color gone from his face. He started to speak, but nothing came out, only a strangled noise. The rest of the table fell silent, forks frozen midair. My mother reached for the folder, but Ryan slammed his hand down on top of it, trying to gather the pages to shield them from view. Too late. Dad reached across, grabbed a handful of documents, started reading. His eyes narrowed. "What the hell is this, Ryan?" No one looked at me, not yet. They stared at him. The golden boy. The only one they'd ever trusted. Suddenly, he was the one on trial. Lauren stood up, knocking her chair over, eyes wide. "Is this true?" she demanded, voice shaking. Ryan tried to answer, but every word died in his throat. The evidence was there in black and white. There was no way to explain it away. Not this time. The room was spinning, voices rising. I watched as years of manipulation cracked open, spilling out for everyone to see. I could have said more, could have twisted the knife, but I just sat back, hands in my lap, as the family that had always chosen him over me tried to understand the man they'd built their lives around. No one touched the turkey. The only sound was the rustle of paper and the sharp, shallow breathing of people realizing everything they believed was a lie. Time seemed to slow as the pages in that folder passed from hand to hand. I watched my family move through every stage of grief, denial, anger, disbelief. Dad demanded explanations. Lauren's eyes filled with tears as she pieced together how much she'd been kept in the dark. My mother looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "What is this?" she asked softly, her voice brittle. I spoke quietly. "It's the truth. The truth about how Ryan changed Grandma's will. About the money he took from Dad's business. About the new will, the one that cut me out, and gave him everything." My father's jaw clenched as he turned over a printout of a bank transfer. "This is from last year. You told me you needed it for the down payment, Ryan." Ryan's mask was gone. No more charm, no clever comeback. He stammered, trying to find a story, but the weight of the evidence was too much. Every accusation was backed up by something in that folder. Emails with forged signatures, lawyer notes, money funneled through side accounts. Lauren pulled her engagement ring off and set it on the table without a word. "Did you ever care about any of us?" she whispered. Ryan tried to plead with her, then with my parents, then with anyone who would listen. He pointed at me, desperate now, voice cracking. "You've always wanted to ruin me. You're jealous. You always have been." But no one was listening. The dam had broken. My aunt, who had always laughed at Ryan's jokes, looked sick. My cousins shifted away from him in their seats. My father stared at the folder, hands trembling, as the realization hit. Everything he'd given his son, all the faith, all the trust, had been twisted into something ugly. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Every piece of evidence was a confession in itself. There were questions, so many questions. Some directed at me, but most at Ryan. "Why did you do it? How long has this been going on? Was any of it real?" No one wanted to hear the answers. I thought I would feel triumphant, but what I really felt was empty. Not because the truth wasn't powerful, but because it changed nothing about the years I'd lost. I couldn't get them back. The only thing I'd gained was clarity, a brutal, clean break from the fantasy that I was the problem. As the room dissolved into chaos, I stood and gathered my things. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. As I reached the door, my mother called after me. Her voice was small. "I'm sorry." I paused, hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. "Me too," I said. And I walked into the cold, night air, feeling the burden I'd carried for so long finally lift. I expected the aftermath to feel dramatic. Sirens, shouting, maybe some kind of closure. Instead, it was eerily quiet. The next day, my phone was full of missed calls and frantic texts, most of them from Lauren and my mother. I didn't answer. I wasn't looking for apologies. I wanted space. Ryan tried to call me too. Once. I let it ring out, then blocked his number. I wondered what he'd say if I gave him the chance, if he'd beg, or try to flip the narrative, make himself the victim again. But it didn't matter. He'd finally run out of stories. Lauren moved out 2 days after Thanksgiving. I heard about it through my cousin. She'd packed her things while Ryan was at work, left the ring behind, and told my parents she never wanted to see him again. Dad changed the locks on the family home. He told Ryan not to come back until he was ready to make things right, which, for the first time, sounded like a real consequence and not just empty words. My mother emailed me long letters. She tried to explain, saying she was blinded and didn't want to see. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I read every word, but when I tried to write back, I realized I had nothing left to say. Years of gaslighting and dismissal don't get fixed by one honest letter. The rest of the family splintered. Some wanted to ignore what happened, pretend Thanksgiving was just another awkward family dinner. Others called it a wake-up call, a reckoning. No one reached out to Ryan, not even the cousins who'd always been on his side. I went back to my own quiet apartment, made tea, and sat with the silence. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even angry. Mostly, I was tired. But I wasn't broken. For the first time, I saw myself clearly, not as the family scapegoat, not as the toxic one, but as someone who had finally stopped waiting for permission to stand up for myself. I realized I'd never wanted revenge. I just wanted to be believed. People talk about justice like it's a single act, a big moment that sets everything right. But sometimes, justice is just surviving with your dignity intact. Sometimes it's leaving the table, taking back your story, and letting the ones who tried to erase you sit in the mess they made. A week after Thanksgiving, I received a formal letter from my parents' lawyer. They'd reinstated me in their will, restored my share of the inheritance, and removed Ryan as executor. There was no apology attached, just paperwork. I smiled, folded it away, and put it in a drawer. The folder that had started all of this was gone now, shredded, deleted, erased for good. I didn't need proof anymore. I had myself, and that was enough.